I went to see the new Planet of the Apes movie titled Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and I was shocked that it explored something boiling under the currents of our current cultural climate. The movie has a dire warning for us. It showcases how grand narratives and guiding myths can be contorted, controlled, and co-opted. It pulls on the strengths of the previous films in the franchise to give us a poignant and intriguing exploration of this issue. It's a timeless issue, but it also feels timely, given some of the cultural shifts we've explored in our series about postsecularism. What exactly does the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes warn us about? What do its themes and narrative have to say about religion, history, politics, nature, and truth? Yes, a movie about talking monkey tribes literally explores all of that. And more importantly, what constructive solutions might the movie also reveal to us? Well, let's explore that. Welcome to Analysis with Alex, your online media studies and literature classroom. Here, we strive to reclaim the goodness and power of the stories we tell. This video will contain spoilers for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, as I'll have to discuss the entire plot for this analysis. If that bothers you before you've seen the movie, you may want to save this video for now and return to it later. So I think Kingdom is perhaps the best entry in the franchise so far, though War of the Planet of the Apes is up there too. This is in part because the movie builds upon certain themes in the previous installments. Namely, it leans more into the themes and aesthetics of the first three movies' protagonist, Caesar, being a Moses-like archetype. Caesar works to lead his people, who are oppressed wanderers of sorts, to a promised land of prosperity and safety. In Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Caesar gives the apes a sort of Ten Commandments set of laws. However, like Moses in the Old Testament, he is only allowed to view his people finally enter this land and dies viewing it, never entering the promised land himself. Leaning into the religious imagery and motifs around Caesar, we see earlier in Kingdom, Caesar does in fact achieve some kind of holy status among the apes. They form iconography, symbols, and practices around what he stood for and taught the other apes. The film then does something really interesting, and it sets the story many generations after Caesar's time. I believe it's supposed to be roughly 400 years later. Our protagonist, Noah, actually has no idea who Caesar even is when we first encounter him. We'll get into the clearly biblical implications of Noah's name later, by the way. We get glimpses of the movie's warning for us in our post-secular moment during the attacking apes, stating, "For Caesar," when they kill and capture other apes. We know that apes killing apes is against one of the laws that Caesar gave. We also see it as Raka, an orangutan who tells Noah about Caesar's teachings, tries to record Caesar's life and teachings in books, as well as glean more information from books he can't understand yet. In short, we see an ape who is hinting at the need for a holy text of sorts after the long-held oral tradition seems not to be functioning properly anymore. But the big moment of the movie's warning occurs when Noah is finally captured by the group of apes that previously captured his village. This is when we see the film's antagonist, Proximus Caesar. Proximus has enslaved other clans, forcing them to open this vault so he can access the human technology locked inside. During this reveal, the religious implications of Proximus's theatrics are pretty clear. There are apes with cloths over their head asking for some kind of blessing. He has the symbol used to remember Caesar painted behind him. He has a call and response session that pulls on words Caesar gave, but the context and implications of those words seem to have changed. What we witness is a subversion of a religious narrative. Unfortunately, I think the film's weak spot is that it doesn't explore this theme even more outside of a few scenes, but the few within it are really intriguing. It remains surface level and vague enough that I think we can take two different interpretations of this narrative point. Either we are witnessing Proximus knowingly manipulating and perverting Caesar's teachings and legacy for his own personal gain, or we can see time and history whittling away at the truth of the matter, and Proximus does all this out of ignorance. I believe there's a notable lack of textual evidence to support either of these interpretations. What's worse, the manipulation or ignorance of the truth behind certain narratives and guiding myths? What I think might be a more interesting question, and one that more aligns with what this movie is trying to accomplish, is though we can see these two different approaches' intent to contort religious and historical narratives, do the outcomes change in essence? Let's think of an outside parallel real fast. We mentioned this guiding myth of manifest destiny earlier in our post-secularism series. One could argue that this colonizing myth as well as the myth of the white man's burden, is a perversion of the cultural mandate found in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. Quote, "And God blessed them, granting them certain authority, and said to them, Be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth and subjugate it, pulling it under your power, and rule over, dominate the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and every living thing that moves upon the earth." End quote. We might say that some people could have willingly known that a contortion of this guiding narrative of us being divinely granted the responsibility to take care of and watch over the world could be used for colonial expansion, even if it was done in malicious and evil manners. That's how you get something like Killers of the Flower Moon. But we could also find evidence that people genuinely believed in goodness to be found in Manifest Destiny, being somewhat ignorant of how it conflicts with the character of God and his mandate here. That's how you get something more like Last of the Mohicans. The outcome is, generally speaking, the same. The colonizing still happened. The same could be said for Proximus here. Either he is completely ignorant of the truth about Caesar, or he knows it can be contorted for personal gain, but both options seem to lead him, believing a kingdom of apes imposed to be together, ruled beneath a Caesar, to open an arsenal left by humans is the highest good possible. This point gets to another theme, an aspect of kingdom that we can witness in our current cultural moment: the romanticization of Roman history, and I think history in general. Some textual evidence that further plays into Proximus's contortion of history is his interest in the ancient Roman Empire. Much of his information about Rome and the older human world comes from Travian, a human prisoner of Proximus who willingly accepts this position. Again, the film keeps this aspect of the character vague, I think to its detriment, but what's here is broad enough that our analysis remains the same. Proximus clearly romanticizes ancient Rome through his status as Caesar, now playing out the title rather than it just being the previous ape's name. Other apes gather around him and ask for a blessing, like the deified Caesars of Rome, believed to have divine power and favor. He mimics Rome in its oppressive structure of using slave labor and conquest to support its causes. One of the more interesting points of Proximus's romanticization of Rome comes from the use of a diegetic background dialogue at one point, meaning that the sound exists within the film's world. Travian can be heard making a comment about how that's when all the Romans had their toga parties. Proximus laughs at this statement as a feast is prepared for him and his guest. Ancient Rome is often romanticized in United States culture. To a degree, it's baked into our culture. Washington, D.C. takes clear inspiration from Rome with its architecture and layout. We tend to speak of Rome's philosophers as laying the groundwork for Western thought and, in turn, the Enlightenment period that led to the United States founding. The grandiosity and glory that ancient Romans chased after feels similar to the guiding myth of the American rags to riches story. In 2023, a meme began to circulate around platforms like TikTok about how men secretly think about the Roman Empire like every week. There's no quantifiable data on how often men actually think about the Roman Empire, but the trend itself and its influence on popular internet culture that year speaks to something. It was popular enough that the quip, "This is my Roman Empire," is still used to describe something that someone is constantly thinking about. There's one way to understand this meme and trend by understanding the crisis in meaning that many men are experiencing currently. That's especially through a lens of gender around the concept of masculinity, given the very male-centric and masculine perception we have of ancient Rome, which isn't like super unfounded. This trend aligns with what Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes explores, a romantic view of ancient Rome. What it really showed, and Wired writer Angela Watercutter agrees with me on this, is how often men think about and are drawn to popular perceptions and media depictions of the Roman Empire rather than its actual history and essence. After polling the entire Wired staff on how often they think about the Roman Empire, Watercutter concluded, quote, "As the cliche goes, history is always written by the victors, but in modern times, it often gets translated by screenwriters and then punched up by studio notes. People tend to be obsessed with the past. The longer my text and Slack's thread stretched, the more respondents tried to figure out why anyone was even talking about dudes and the Roman Empire in the first place. It evolved into questions about why humans are enthralled by war, the collective fascination with powerful men, and on and on and on. No one ever really figured out why the meme went viral, or whether men really do think about the Roman Empire all that much, or more than people of other genders. but we were entertained. That sense of entertainment requires a substantial amount of romanticization. Hence, we see Proximus giggle about Roman history and promote some strange contorted view on how mimicking it is a good thing for his monkey kingdom. To a degree, can we truly understand and capture a moment in history? Historian Tom Holland broke into a lot of divisive and controversial territory with the release of his 2019 book, Dominion, The Making of the Western Mind, or Dominion, How the Christian Revolution Remade the World in the United States. He questioned how much the claims of our Enlightenment-fueled philosophy can truly trace itself back to the Hellenistic and Roman worlds, and argued that it's basically a false idea to believe that these great Western powers have influenced our cultures as much as we claim them to do and worship them for doing so. Rather, the influence of Christianity had much wider influence and repercussions than Western historians and thinkers have given it credit for in the past, with a special focus on its impact on our morality. Quote, "To hail a religion for its compatibility with a secular society was decidedly not a neutral gesture. Secularism was no less bred of the sweat of Christian history than were Orban's barbed wire fences. Naturally, for it to function as its exponents wished for it to function, this could never be admitted. The West, over the duration of its global hegemony, had become skilled in the art of repackaging Christian concepts for non-Christian audiences. A doctrine, such as that of human rights, was far likelier to be signed up for if its origins among the canon lawyers of medieval Europe could be kept concealed. The insistence of the United Nations agencies on, quote, the antiquity and broad acceptance of the conception of rights of man was a necessary precondition for their claim to be a global rather than merely Western jurisdiction. Secularism, in an identical manner, depended on the care with which it could cover its tracks. If it were to be embraced by Jews or Muslims or Hindus as a neutral holder of the ring between them and the people of other faiths, then it could not afford to be seen as what it was, a concept that had little meaning outside of a Christian context." End quote. So why should you care that popular media and stories romanticize and contort history? In addition to how it's a contortion of truth, if that's something you care about, it has direct influence and repercussions on how people live their lives, interact with their neighbors, and think about the world and humanity at large. We already mentioned how something like Manifest Destiny fits into this conversation, but there are plenty of other examples. One notable example in the United States is how often dialogue around the American Civil War is divisive. Some promote a highly romanticized view of the Confederate States of America, often lumped into a guiding myth called the Lost Cause narrative. But others might completely demonize every aspect of people under the CSA, stating that every individual was explicitly racist and hate-mongering, which leads to an over-romanticization of the Union and a contortion of its goals. Both of these contortions lead individuals to flippantly make comments on how we're heading to another civil war or welcome the idea of having something like that again. It leads to hateful, unconstructive, and dehumanizing conversations with those who might ideologically differ from us. It influences your friend circle, your workspace, and your community. It's so much a talking point that it's profitable for Alex Garland and A24 to release a movie simply titled Civil War that attempts to capture what a new internal conflict in the United States would look like, for better or for worse, most likely for worse. So, much like in Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, our culture experiences manipulation around religion and its source essence and text, as well as lessons from history. Where do you go from here? Well, the film's plot and its use of specific motifs seem to hold an answer. As simple as it sounds, the answer is to encounter and pursue truth. This is a two-part truth. There's a lowercase t truth about understanding the historical facts and source material of something, such as what Caesar actually stood for. Then there's the capital T truth about the objective value and orientation that something like Caesar's teachings pointed to. You can probably see where I'm going with this. First, let's look at what I mean within the narrative of the movie. Noah learns about what Caesar actually taught and meant by his teachings through Raka, who upholds the true essence and facts about the ape religion surrounding Caesar. Through this understanding, Noah begins to see how his tribe's way of life aligns with some higher good. They emphasize cooperation between each other and potentially other apes, between themselves and nature as seen through their relationship with hawks, and are open to the idea that they should coexist among humans. Noah and his tribe understand that to avoid the pitfalls of Proximus and his kingdom, they must embrace and pursue truth even if it uproots a lot of their previous lifestyle. Also, the movie focuses more on the theme of truth through the motifs surrounding Noah. For example, his name is Noah, wink wink Bible. He relies on a bird to understand a strange land he is in, and those who are against the truth are drowned in a flood. So that's a thing. This movie fits into similar dynamics in our conversations around post-secularism, meaning making, and understanding the tumultuous tides that spirituality is currently experiencing. As an example, let's take the ongoing conversations around Christian nationalism. I'm sure I won't get any bad comments going into this territory. I'm going to speak about this in a rather general sense. I know it is more complicated than I'm making it out to be here, but we're mainly seeing how something like conversations around religion and politics makes a movie about a smart monkey trying to replicate the Roman Empire a sign of our times. Christian nationalism, and to be honest, cultural discourse around Christianity and politics in a general sense, I'm saying this for both left-leaning and right-leaning political thought, relies on the two themes Kingdom explores: the subversion of religious narratives, and the romanticization of history. For the subversion of religious narratives, one can quickly see how enthused involvement in political action and government might conflict with some of the teachings of Jesus. The idea that there's a duty for Christians to be deeply involved in politics and bending the general policy making of a nation state toward what is perceived to be the most godly policies conflicts with Mark 12, 13 through 17, as well as some of the epistles such as Acts 5, verse 29, Titus 3, verse 9, Philippians 3, verse 20, Romans 13, verses 1 through 7, and many other instances. All of these foundational verses and teachings must be subverted to gather support for nationalistic pride and devotion by the followers of Jesus to uphold a nation as the greatest thing. Again, it appears this could be done through direct manipulation or willful ignorance. The romanticization of history comes in the form of understanding America as a Christian nation. There is a typically idealized vision of certain time periods in American history, such as the founding of the country via the Revolutionary War and the First National Congress. Similar perspectives are often used around World War II and the post-war period. I think one of the most evident pieces of media around this currently is the trend of trad wives. Although that's not inherent to many Christian nationalist thoughts, there's certainly some overlap there. Similar to our analysis of the romanticized vision of ancient Rome, much of this perception around these historical periods seems to stem more so from popular media than actual history. The Revolutionary War is more the Patriot than anything else. The 1950s were clearly Leave It to Beaver and Back to the Future, and not some time period riddled with anxiety from the threat of atomic power and radical communism. That's to also say there are idealized or contorted views on these same time periods or others from politically charged theology such as liberation theology that goes against ideas promoted by Christian nationalism. The general perception around these time periods is to support a lot of talking points you find in Christian nationalist circles. I think the anxiety around Christian nationalism, which sells a lot of books and gets a lot of online clicks, is a clear sign that these things matter to us. That's because, in the end, the truth matters. The same double-sided truth we mentioned earlier, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, shows us how encountering and pursuing the truth leads to an actual change, and an actual grounding in something grander than ourselves. It is a clear way to further generations, to share community and love, and to live in a more symbiotic and harmonious method with nature. That said, the truth may require us to sacrifice and uproot certain things in our lives. It will require us to submit to something, even if that thing is as simple as a sense of confusion, like with Noah. When we embrace these difficult things that the truth pulls us towards, we find ourselves, a more true version of ourselves. It orients us to the highest good, and we experience freedom and love on a level that no man-made narrative could ever supply. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you got something totally different from Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to start a discussion down there. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, please let me know that as well. Anything helps, and doing those things can help get this video in front of others that might be interested in it like you. If you like cultural analysis like this, please consider subscribing, as well as if you like long-form book reviews. I do a lot of that on the channel as well. That's one of the best ways that you can support what I'm doing here. Again, let me know what you thought about all this in the comments below, and I'll see you all in our next exploration.